What's up, guys? Welcome back. Welcome back. This week's episode, we're going to answer the question, what is an investment company? What is the Investment Company Act? Basically, if you are an investment company, your company is in the business of buying and selling investments, buying and selling securities. So traditionally, things like hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capital funds, funds like that, where you're investing in a fund and the fund is going out and buying other people's securities. If you're doing that, then you are an investment company, and the Investment Company Act, the law is called the Investment Company Act. That law now applies to you, and generally speaking, you are supposed to register as an investment company with the SEC unless an exemption applies. Well, in the real estate syndication space, if you are in the business of buying and selling other people's securities, then you are an investment company. And in the syndication world, where this applies is if you are doing a fund of funds. So if you're syndicating a fund, if you're pulling investor funds together to go out and invest in other people's real estate syndications, then you are going out to buy securities, you are going out to buy investments, and you are technically an Investment Company Act. And now the general rule is you must register as an investment company with the SEC unless you find some sort of exemption. Well, most people don't want to register. Same reason why companies don't want to register their securities with SEC is, the main reason is cost. Generally speaking, costs kind of dictate a lot of the reasons why people do a lot of things. It costs a lot of money to register with the SEC, and there's ongoing reporting that you are now required to do. So compliance issues for registering as an investment company. But there are exemptions. There are some exemptions that are available and can apply if you're doing a fund of funds, if you're doing a fund to invest in other people's syndications. What are those exemptions? Well, keep watching and find out. But first, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is John Nia. I am one of the founding partners here at Trowbridge Law Group. And although I am a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, unless you're one of my clients. So I'm not your lawyer. This is not legal advice. As always, this is educational material. This is education. The reason we have these videos is for education purposes. Simple as that. If you want legal advice, give us a call. Go to our website, trowbridgelawgroup.com. We give free 30-minute consultations. Give me a call. Maybe I could be your lawyer and give you legal advice. As always, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you enjoy this content, we produce at least weekly videos. So subscribe and you'll be up to date on the most recent videos we put out. Anyways, back to the regularly scheduled content. What are the exemptions that you can utilize if you are an investment company and you don't want to register as an investment company with the SEC? There's actually a whole list if you just search Investment Company Act exemptions. I think there's 11. There's a long list of exemptions that are available, but there's three main ones that most people in our world in the real estate syndication space can use. The other ones are more for if you're like a bank or if you're like a nonprofit, stuff like that, right? Where it's not going to apply to our clients and to anyone that's really watching this video. So there's three main ones. The first two are what's known as the private fund exemptions. So hedge funds that want to be private, that they don't want to be publicly traded hedge funds, they would utilize one of these two exemptions. First one is known as 3C1. It's the Rule 3C1 exemption. And in order to apply that exemption, you have to have fewer than 100 investors in your fund. So if you are willing to do that, if you're able to do that, then you could utilize the 3C1 exemption, which says you are capped at 100 investors. So if you're doing that, you have to make sure that you don't bring in more than 100 investors. And, it seems easy, right? You just, count each investor that's investing in your deal and, make sure you stay under 100. But what about if some of your investors are entities? Well, you got to look at the beneficial ownership of that structure. So if you have an LLC that's an investor and that LLC is owned by 5 people, that's 5 investors that you got to count towards your fund. So that's exemption number 1. Make sure you have fewer than 100 investors. The second private fund exemption is Rule 3C7, which is the exemption that's related to qualified purchasers. So you are, if you want to utilize the 3C7 exemption, you are required to only sell your securities to qualified purchasers, which is a defined term. And it's similar to accredited investors. So if you're familiar with Regulation D, accredited investor is basically a person that has a net worth over $1 million or an income over $200,000 a year, or there's some sort of entity that falls under that. Well, qualified purchaser is a much higher threshold. So generally speaking, you have to have a net worth of over $5 million. There's no income threshold, right? So it's only net worth. And then there's other types of entities that can fall under a qualified purchaser definition. But the important point to note is it's a much, much higher threshold than just being a accredited investor. So you're limited as far as who can invest in your deal. And this is the reason why, a lot of large private hedge funds, you go out there, they don't let you invest unless you are a qualified purchaser, which is, this exemption. So that's the 3C7 exemption, qualified purchaser. So exemption 1, fewer than 100 investors. Exemption 2, only qualified purchasers. The third exemption isn't really one of the exemptions listed out in the long list of exemptions. It's just, it's kind of like, it logically follows, right, that if you are not in the business of buying and selling securities, then you're not an investment company, right? So if you look at some of the no action letters that are out there provided by the SEC and certain case law that's out there, you are able to kind of form this picture of how do I make sure that I'm not in the business of buying and selling securities. And one of the ways to do that is to set up your fund of fund structure so that you're not in the business of buying securities. You're actually in the business of syndicating. You're in the business of running syndications. And the way to do that, generally speaking, this is one way to do that, is to make sure that your second tier fund, so your fund of funds is buying a controlling interest in the tier 1 fund. So how that looks is, you have the syndication fund, you have the syndication LLC that is, regular syndication that's going to be purchasing a property, and then you're setting up another LLC that is the fund of funds. That's a second tier fund that's going to be buying interest in the tier 1 syndication LLC. If the second tier fund, second tier LLC has a controlling interest over the first tier fund and has the power to make management decisions, has the power to remove the person in charge, then that second tier fund isn't really in the business of buying the securities of first tier fund. It's in the business of running this fund. It's in the business of syndicating, managing a syndication. And that is the argument that you can make and say that we are not an investment company. We don't have to register as an investment company because we're not in the business of buying and selling this company's securities. We're in the business of running this company. How do you do that? Well, you got to look at the voting interests, the voting rights of the first tier fund, who has control over it, who has management control over it. If it's an LLC, you got to look at the operating agreement. And if the operating agreement says that this second tier fund has control, then it's not an investment company because it's in the business of running a syndication. So those are the 3 exemptions. Exemption number 1, fewer than 100 investors. Exemption number 2, only sell to qualified purchasers. And exemption number 3, make sure that the fund is only in the business of running another business. It's not in the business of buying and selling securities. That's the Investment Company Act. That's what it means to be an investment company. And those are the 3 exemptions that can possibly apply to a syndicator if you're doing a fund of funds. If you would like more information about being an investment company, if you have questions about your own deal, whether or not your deal is an investment company, again, give us a call. We do free 30-minute consultations. Go to trowbridgelawgroup.com. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's question of the week. If you did, please give us a like down below. Leave us a comment. Helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Ask a question down below. Maybe I didn't answer every single question that everyone has about investment companies. I'm sure I didn't. So if you got a question about it, please leave it down below. And as always, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week.